PS5 Pro continues to show good signs for the future, but not without some missteps along the way. Even the latest Mark Cerny round of videos has something in it that I think is a pretty big mistake, especially in light of some of the things that have happened with bad patches and updates recently. I will say that most of what he's saying shows a bright future for a handful of things. The PS5 Pro specifically, PSSR, the PlayStation 6, and the future first-party games. But before we can look at this potentially bright future, we have to look at the recent missteps and why I think something Mark Cerny said in the Digital Foundry interview is a mistake. New technology always has growing pains. Implementation can be rushed, developers may lack experience, or the tech just isn't polished yet. We've seen a pretty steady flow of Unreal 5 games that have fallen prey to this. And when it comes to the PS5 Pro and PSSR, there have been games that obviously rushed patches to market and ultimately made the games look worse. A few quick examples: Star Wars Outlaws had to patch in a PSSR toggle, mainly because PSSR can introduce image shimmer to some games and it's not very pretty. One of the main concerns anytime you're using any kind of upscaling is that it starts to harm the image quality or image stability, and Ubisoft doesn't seem to be implementing the PSSR technology very well either, because another game suffered similar problems. Just weeks ago, it was reported that Avatar: Frontiers of Pandora looked worse after a PS5 Pro patch. It took them about 10 days to fix it, and by fix it, they just gave you the ability to toggle PSSR off. Now, they did indicate they're looking into the situation and they're going to work to improve the use of PSSR for the PS5 Pro quality mode. And just this week, Alan Wake 2 pushed out the same update. They're going to let you disable PSSR, and another game that reported similar issues was Jedi Survivor. Now, keep in mind, at the time that I'm recording this, there are over 70 games that have been in PS5 Pro Enhanced. It should also be pointed out that both the Star Wars games are notorious for having poor optimization and poor performance. Jedi Survivor is still not fixed on PC, it spent months looking terrible on console, and Star Wars Outlaws' performance on console is just inexcusable. It's been inconsistent and ugly since launch. But Alan Wake 2 and Avatar certainly show that better quality control is needed, or at the very least, some games and engines need to take more time to get good implementation of PSSR. And something Mark Cerny said in the interview with Digital Foundry, I consider to be a mistake in light of these developments. He made it clear that they will not be mandating anything to how developers implement these modes and these updates. I see this as problematic for a few reasons. First, some of the games just aren't adding patches to make things worse, they're removing modes and options. Taking away quality and performance modes is not something devs should be doing. Consumers should not be getting less choice after spending more money. If a user feels like the standard performance mode just looks better, they should be able to use it instead of whatever new mode a developer pushes out. The second problem with this is that it doesn't really take ownership of quality control. Devs should not be able to push out patches leveraging your new tech that makes things worse. The buck stops with Sony here because consumers purchased a Pro console from you on the basis of these tech and on the basis of this upgrade. Lastly, it's allowing a few bad apples to make folks run with false narratives. PSSR is a flop or PSSR failed. Mark made it clear that PSSR is how they branded the tech. It's theirs. Well, your brand and your tech is getting scapegoated and blamed for what amounts to just bad updates and rushed patches. It's especially frustrating when it comes from games that already had performance issues to begin with. So in my opinion, these missteps and the lack of a mandate should be addressed if the bright future is going to come to fruition, because there are a lot of good things that came out of this update and the subsequent interviews. One of the biggest takeaways from the Digital Foundry interview is that PSSR will improve over time. And if there's one game that completely shuts down the false claims about PSSR failing or being bad for games, it's Space Marine 2. Sadly, we don't have a breakdown of the PS5 Pro update from Digital Foundry yet, but one YouTuber, Gaming Tech, observed just how much of an improvement PSSR was in Space Marine 2 versus FSR. He speculated that it could be using an updated version of PSSR. He said it was one of the best implementations he had seen so far. So obviously this reinforces what I was already saying about certain games doing a better job, and it may also just be engine dependent. But according to Cerny, there will be updates and improvements to PSSR as time goes on. But there are definitely pros and cons to having something like this improve and change over time. The pros would obviously be you get improved performance over time, making adjustments to make it work better with the various engines. It gives developers more headroom and smoother implementation. But there are some negatives here. Cerny wasn't exactly sure what it would look like. Maybe the devs can opt into getting the PSSR update automatically, or maybe the user can opt in to it being updated, but that could obviously break current builds. If the dev opts in and unknowingly breaks their build, how can they roll back? We've already seen bad implementation of PSSR from devs. They could sort of lazily or blindly just accept an update that hurts the quality of the game. Overall, I see this taking a similar path that we have seen with DLSS. It will improve over time, and the devs will just get better at using it. So while it's exciting to think about the future of PSSR improving over time, it was what Cerny said about resolution that really stood out to me. I have continued to say that focusing on native resolution is a fool's errand. Gamers who continue to focus on this don't seem to understand just how far upscaling technology has come, and it's very likely that developers are going to continue to lean on upscalers, which has led a lot of false framing to come out. People are claiming that, well, developers are pushing out these unoptimized games and they just rely on upscalers to fix everything. This just simply isn't true. A poorly optimized game is simply a poorly optimized game. It has no direct connection to utilizing upscalers or not doing native resolution. It's not like if the developer pushed for native resolution that the game would have been better optimized. Obviously, there is going to be some correlation between a development team that pushes out a game that's not optimized or ready for launch, and they also are using an upscaler to try to help. Or, like with Black Myth Wukong, we saw them using frame gen to double the frames of a 30 FPS game. This is a misuse of the technology. But upscaling will continue to improve and be utilized by development teams. And Mark Cerny said that we should change how we talk about resolution, and Ollie from Digital Foundry agreed with him. The focus should shift instead to being about image quality. The technology is both advancing and changing in this direction. It's no longer about pushing native resolutions through brute strength of the hardware. It's about improving upscaling technology to provide a higher quality image as well as a more stable image. The most remarkable thing about this topic is how many of these alleged tech experts and PC-centric folks are so quick to decry new technology as a failure or a flop due to a few bad patches from developers that are known for poor optimization. First passes are notorious for their rough edges and their growing pains. New tech always goes through this, and Sony is clearly dedicated to console, seeing improvements in this area when you hear what Cerny has to say about Project Amethyst and working with AMD. During the new presentation, Cerny announced a deeper collaboration with AMD to work on machine learning-based technology for graphics and gameplay. This is a multi-year project codenamed Project Amethyst, but his interview with Digital Foundry made something very clear. His focus is seeing this partnership and project benefit the console, so this is likely aimed at the PlayStation 6. This reinforces something that I've been saying since Herman Hulst spoke to their PC strategy with tentpole titles earlier this year. Everything they do orbits around the console. Even this project with AMD is a console-centric idea from Cerny's perspective, which is tied to something else he spoke about with Digital Foundry. He was asked about, do they still believe in generational jumps? And they do. Basically, he said that the Pro is a very tightly centered around GPU device. The improvements were largely focused there. But when it comes to the PS6 or the next generation, there'll be a broader focus. They'll look at everything, the GPU, the CPU, memory, haptics, and the like. This somewhat pushes back against predictions that I made about the PS6 having more of an overlap with the Pro. I still think graphical jumps will be less severe generation to generation going forward, but Cerny clearly sees the next generation as something that they will push for broad enhancements on, and it's very likely that Project Amethyst is directly related to the PlayStation 6. So, as I said, the future is bright for the PS5 Pro, the PSSR technology, and the PlayStation 6. But those are just my thoughts. I'd love to hear your thoughts. If you make a comment below, you may get featured in the live stream that follows this video. It always hits the card here, and I also pin a comment below with a link to that live discussion. And as always, if you like this video, please remember to hit like, share, and subscribe.